Hello, this is about keeping it real. I just needed to move my chair and get myself ready. Isn't this what we all do before we start doing some sort of video thing and then find nothing goes out of the way? Oh, let me just put this up so I'm the right height. I have one of those super duper desks that goes up and down. I have to be careful. Grandkids come around and they're around it all the time. So keeping it real. Today, storytelling. What's your story? Now, my story today is I wasn't ready when I clicked the button. Often happens. Doesn't that make us more human? Doesn't that make us more, okay, yes, they make the same mistakes we do. Just sorting everything out. When you do videos, sometimes nightmare. But here we are. And part of my story is that I have a very flexible way of working, if you like. Everything is adapted to the person I'm working with and me and everything else. And that works really, really well because we're not the same people and we don't have the same stories and we don't have the same whys. As you all know from last week, gave up on last week in the end. Took Friday off, didn't do anything over the weekend. And this week, feeling really productive and ready to go forward with stuff. So done loads of content stuff, like you do. Content is king, content is king. And I think one of those things when we think about content, we don't think about our stories. We don't think about how our stories have made us into who we are today. And that, I think, is really, really important because wherever you are at this moment in time, a lot of it will be affected by what happened before. Now, it doesn't matter if you're in a good place or a bad place or an indifferent place. You're there because of yesterday, last week, last month, last year, 5 years, 10 years, all that accumulated experience and issues and challenges and highs and lows. All of it brings us to where we are. And it doesn't end today. Our story continues on into the future. But how we react today to stuff that has happened will affect what happens in the future. And our stories are not siloed. They're not, well, then I was at school and then I went to work and then I left that job and now I'm doing this. Our story is like a river. It flows all the time. And there are times when that river is really still and peaceful and you can wade into it. And because the sun hits it, it's really warm and it's pleasant. And then a few miles down, that same river could be going over rocks. It could be forced through a small, I don't know much about rivers, but you could end up with that whole rough river that you can't go near it. It'll sweep you away. It's all become very dangerous, even in that river. And then it flows on. So a river doesn't care. It doesn't think about where it's got to. It just continues on down through all of that until it reaches the end and then off into the sea. Maybe I should learn about rivers before I start talking about it. But the point is, our stories are ever flowing. And depending on your belief system, even to the very end, when we pass on to something else, our story continues to flow. And our story is in our hands. We have control of our story. And from a personal perspective, when I look back on my story and all the challenges and all the things that have happened, and trust me, I've had as much, I've had my fair share of difficult times, and I'm never going to compare that with anybody else's difficult times, because within each of us is the ability to cope with our own difficult times. And it's not about, well, it wasn't as bad as somebody else, or somebody saying, well, you have no idea what bad times are. I can only go on my experience and you can only go on your experiences. But looking back on them and I see how I overcame them or how afterwards I learned to deal with stuff. And it's brought me to here. And I'm a very happy, very lucky, very grateful lady now who has amazing kids, amazing grandchildren, amazing family and friends, even through lockdown. And I run a business I love doing because I want to, and I'm passionate to get women to recognize their own power and recognize their awesomeness. And in business, I talk a lot about people and their stories. People buy into stories. We buy into the journey someone's taking. We want to wade about in that river with you for a little while. Well, while it's nice and calm and warm, obviously not when it goes down into the rapids and it's freezing cold. Don't want to do that. But we want to know you're real. Everybody wants to get to know a little bit more about someone that they are going to have a relationship with. And that doesn't matter if that's a lifelong relationship with, a fleeting passing relationship because they happen to have purchased something from you or they've commented on something on Facebook. We all want to know a little bit more. We want to understand those people and trust those people. And if you thinking yourself that's how you behave, then don't forget, if you're doing it, so are other people. It's always about how we touch the world, how we place those footsteps in the world, how what we do affects other people. And in my experience, there are those people that go, it's about me. How does the world affect me? And then there's the other group that go, how can I affect the world? And you have to, in a way, make a conscious decision who you want to be. And for me, it's, I want to know that my impact on the world is a positive impact, that it gives something back to people, that I'm not here just taking, that I am giving. And trust me, that doesn't happen every day. You should see me and my daughter get together and go, do we have a bit of a, just because we feel like it? And then we both go, oh, aren't we awful people? No, we're not awful people. We're human. And we have good days, we have bad days. But generally, I think we are all able to decide in our head how we want to live. How do we want our story to go on? How do we want to impact on the world in a way that leaves something positive and impactful for the next generations? And looking around us now, you know, we're beginning to realize that the next generation, we're leaving them with a lot of poo, to save me actually swearing. And how can we all make that different for them? I think of it as like, do you think when the kids were young, my kids were young, and you know, I would tidy and then they would completely wreck it the next day. And I went through, oh, you can live in that. We can't do that. We have to keep the next generation safe, and we have to give them a future, and we have to encourage change. And only we can do it, one at a time, one step at a time. And the beginning of that is just making a decision. So think about your story. How do you want your story to end? How do you want your river to flow going on? How are you going to deal with the rough river and the rapids and the cold and everything else before it enters another beautiful stream with the sun on it and it's nice and calm and you can paddle in it again? Just have a think about it. But that's what we need to be doing. So I need to get back to work. I need to be doing something. And I'm so pleased you did come and listen today to my Keeping It Real, because part of my story is I've always been real and true to myself, because I can't be real and true to anyone else. And that's who I am. And that's okay.